Through the direction of elitist politicians working their craft in a hopelessly corrupt system, the established government in Washington, D.C. and all state houses act as gatekeepers to broker the power of our nation to powerful, and many would argue, malevolent interests. This makes these powerful interests our rulers. These interests have many and varied agendas, including forcing our nation into submission to a dictatorial global regime with aims of wholesale annihilation of our self-determination and displacement of our sovereignty, racial and cultural identity and traditions. Because Americans have been conditioned to equate the nation with the government, we believe we must obey whatever is handed down to us. We are conditioned to believe such corruption is proper, and although undesirable, it is unavoidable as a byproduct of our system. In fact, it is not proper, nor are we bound by it in any way. Americans remain focused, trapped in their minds, in the brain box of the Constitution and the government it created. By this, we fail to see that we betray ourselves. We give loyalty to a failed system that does not serve us but only empowers our masters. Despite massive corruption and betrayal of our ideals, our political system maintains positions of dictatorial power by keeping us dependent on them. We have transformed from a nation where individuals were masters of their own domain before the American Republic to one where we are beholden to advocates who make requests for us for favor from the appointed rulers. This is how a republic works. It is essentially a trust. The Constitution has bestowed upon them virtually all of our power. We agreed to this, so we have entrusted them with the management and care of our nation, which means we have given them the power emanating from that which we created and which we own. This structure and our relationship with those we appointed as custodians has created the mechanism and incentive for its self-perpetuation, even against our will, and has supplied them with the power necessary to keep it. The most effective way they are able to maintain the power structure is through our supplication and democratic representation. They represent us as advocates for access to the centers of wealth and power. But all the wealth and power of our civilization stems from us, which means we beg for that which is already ours. That has reversed the relationship between master and servant. It allows them to dole out favor, like as a dog's master who holds the food bowl. So why do we beg for it? Advocacy, which is called democratic representation, gives them power over us and makes us dependent upon them. We have been reduced to a nation of supplicants, begging the imperial government for what belongs to us. We own it, yet we beg the government for it. Usurious government has reduced us to desperate dependents, who must turn to them for our survival, by separating us into groups by minority classification, and then handing out special considerations such as imagined minority civil rights, which trample on the sovereign rights of the majority, or the right to someone else's wealth, or exemptions from undue burden placed on others, or an endless list of special considerations. Divisive social engineering in government has a purpose. Government is in the business of elevating real minorities toward the same status as the majority, while suppressing the real majority voice into many minority classifications. It is important to understand that all of us are viewed by government as fitting into some minority classification, while they do their best to stamp out anything which represents the voice of the majority. This tactic allows them to put all of the population into one or more minority classifications, then set one against another with all vying for their favor. It is very old and termed divide and conquer. All of these things maintain their power over us because it inures the recipients of the largesse to those who seemingly have the power to dole out such favor from on high, to maintain the sham order. Unfortunately, since we have not yet remedied this insult, this all means that we at present accept the corrupt relationship. It is our belief that we do so, having forgotten the proper order and having been purposefully conditioned to accept the sham order. Those who maintain the sham order will continue to do so until we discover and effect the correction. I started by asking the question, who owns the nation? And have demonstrated the obvious, that we the people do, just as the English King George attempted over 220 years ago. Their most potent weapon is to convince us that we do not own it, that we have no claim and never have. They fill our nation with foreign strangers who actually have no claim, then propagate the lie, we are all a nation of immigrants, which implies that we, original Americans and foreigners alike, all have the same non-status. They imply we are all in the same boat as that of wayward vagabonds, having just arrived on our shore, void of any right or inheritance. And further, they toss us into the same class, merely guests at their amusement park in their hotel. By this, they assert that they are the owners of the nation and we are not. However, they must maintain and enlarge the welfare state to keep their power. Have you ever thought about what happens when you are locked in a cage with a lion, feeding it from a bucket of raw meat? Then you run out of meat? They must define and divide us by classification, so they only need to buy the loyalty of a portion in order to keep the lot of us conquered. For the present, they have conditioned us from remembering that we own the nation and are sovereigns with the power to remake the nation at our whim. But for how long? The current order is backwards, but for how long? We are the owners and as such have all rights, while they are simply servants and caretakers. Yet we have been persuaded to believe things to be the other way around. But for how long will that remain to be the case?